I still remember the smell of stale coffee and worn carpet in the backroom office they gave me, the one with no windows. The walls were thin enough to hear everything, and that day, it saved me. I was staying late again, finalizing the last pieces of a predictive pricing model I'd been working on for over a year. A system that could calculate freight costs against real-time demand, fuel spikes, and bottleneck data. If it worked, and I knew it would, it could save Magnus Freight over $3 million a year. I should have felt proud. Instead, I felt used. I stretched my legs, stepped into the hallway, and that's when I heard it. Muffled laughter through the closed door of the executive lounge. My name floated out, casually, like I was just another item on someone's to-do list. As soon as she's done with the code, she's out, said a voice I'd come to loathe. Dean, the CEO's son. He was chuckling, sounding proud of himself. I already promised it to you, babe, he said. The minute she turns in that file, we'll bring you in. Easy promotion. I froze. My hands clenched into fists before I even realized it. His girlfriend, Lila, a marketing intern with zero coding experience and a glossy Instagram following. I'd trained under the CTO, worked double shifts, taught myself Python and R in my downtime. And now I was being handed off like a broken chair. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Don't worry, he added with a smirk I could practically hear. She's the type that thinks loyalty gets her something. She won't see it coming. I walked away before I broke something. But I did see it coming. I'd seen it weeks ago. Ever since Dean had returned from business school, entitled Smug, full of half-baked startup jargon, things had changed. Meetings that used to include me were suddenly executive only. I stopped getting copied on memos. Lila started sitting at my desk when I left for lunch. But hearing him say it like I was disposable, did something to me. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I planned. The next morning, I came in early. I copied the predictive model to a secure external drive, one I kept in a fireproof safe at home. I didn't delete anything from my work laptop. I wanted them to feel safe, to think they had everything. I spent the next 2 weeks polishing the code, documenting every variable, every query, every machine learning weight I'd tuned by hand. I smiled when Dean dropped by my desk with his fake charm and his smarmy, "How's it going, Sarah?" "Oh, it's going," I'd say, cheerful as ever. I finished the model late on a Thursday night, uploaded it, sent the email. Subject line, "Final version, predictive pricing alpha V 1.0. I even added a few notes for clarity. Not because I cared, but because it was the kind of thing that made people think you were still loyal. The next morning, I was called into the glass conference room, the one with too many plants and not enough soul. Dean was waiting with HR. "I'm afraid we're restructuring," he said, sounding rehearsed. "Your position is no longer aligned with our vision moving forward." I looked at him, really looked, and I smiled. "Good luck," I said calmly. He looked surprised, almost disappointed, like he expected tears. I stood up, thanked HR for the opportunity, and walked out with my head held high. The sun hit my face as I stepped outside. It felt warm, clean, like something had been lifted from my shoulders. They thought they had won. They had no idea what was missing. 2 weeks later, I got a call. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. "Hi, this is Carl from compliance. We're trying to locate a missing module from the predictive pricing system. It appears to be corrupt or incomplete. Please call us back immediately." I hit play again, just to hear the panic in his voice. I sat back in my chair, sipping my tea, and whispered to no one. And so it begins. The voicemail played in my ear a third time, and I still wasn't tired of hearing it. Missing module from the predictive pricing system appears to be corrupt or incomplete. I paused it and let the silence settle around me. The satisfaction wasn't in the panic. It was in the clarity. For once, they were the ones scrambling. And for the first time in years, I had the upper hand. What they didn't realize was that the missing module, the core algorithm that powered the entire model, had never actually been uploaded to their server. I had written it separately, independently, on my personal laptop. Late nights with lo-fi music in the background and empty mugs scattered around the desk. The heart of the system, the piece that made it a $3 million asset, was mine. And I'd built it off the clock, at home, outside of their firewalls and ownership clauses. I could already guess what had happened. Dean or someone on his team tried to run the model during a demo, probably in front of a few big-name investors. But instead of smooth projections and smart cost simulations, they got a cascade of null values and broken links. I smirked, but I didn't respond right away. I waited. Because that's what power looks like. Not reacting too quickly. By Monday morning, 3 more calls came in. Then an email from a different domain. Someone from finance this time. Subject line, urgent. Missing code segments. Pricing model. I opened it just to see how desperate they were getting. Hi, Sarah. I hope you're doing well. We're currently experiencing some difficulty accessing a specific module within the predictive pricing tool you developed. If you could spare a moment to assist us, we'd be grateful. This is quite time-sensitive and could impact several major client meetings this week. I leaned back and let out a quiet laugh. Time-sensitive, they said. Sure, because they'd tied the launch of this model to a client renewal contract worth $3 million. What they didn't know was that I had been reading their quarterly reports for months. I knew they were depending on this tool to slash costs and prove to investors that Magnus Freight was ready for its next growth phase. I knew Dean had promised the board the model was functional. Revolutionary, he said, if I recall correctly. I also knew they were betting their next funding round on it. And now they were standing on a foundation made of sand. Around noon, I got a call from someone I didn't expect. Margot, the company's senior project manager. A woman I used to respect before she turned a blind eye to everything Dean was doing. Hi, Sarah, she began, trying to sound casual. Listen, I know this might be awkward, but we could really use your help. There's a small issue with the model files. Some pieces seem to be missing or maybe corrupted. We just want to make sure it was all transferred properly. I stayed quiet for a beat. Then I said, That's odd. I uploaded exactly what was requested. You did, she rushed to say. I mean, we have the upload, but it's not behaving the way we expected. That's unfortunate, I replied. But I no longer work at Magnus Freight. There was a pause. Then she said the thing I knew would come eventually. Dean asked if you'd consider consulting, just short-term, to help us get this sorted. Of course, we'd compensate you for your time. There it was, the crack. The first sign that the armor around their arrogance was breaking. I'll think about it, I said, keeping my tone neutral. But in reality, I already knew my answer. Later that night, I reviewed the contract I'd signed with Magnus. Clause 12, intellectual property. It was exactly as I remembered. Anything created on company time using company equipment belonged to them. But I'd covered my bases. I pulled up my Git logs, time-stamped commits, and IP address trails. Every key breakthrough happened after 6:30 p.m. Every change came from my home network. I had screenshots, cloud backups, and even metadata embedded in the original files. And just to be extra sure, I emailed the entire file structure to my lawyer with a simple message, in case they try to come for it. The next morning, I opened LinkedIn. The post I'd made a few days earlier, something vague about ownership, integrity, and the power of walking away, was getting traction. Over 800 views. A few former coworkers had liked it. A recruiter from a logistics tech startup had commented, "We should talk." But what caught my eye was a profile view. Dean West, CEO's son. I could almost see him sweating. That afternoon, I got a text from an unknown number. "Sarah, please, we're in trouble. We need the file. Call me back." Dean. I read it twice, then muted my phone. They thought they could replace me like I was nothing, but now they were learning the hard way. You don't discard the architect and expect the building to stand. 3 days after Dean's panicked text, I got an email that made me stop mid-sip of my morning coffee. Subject line: confidential meeting request, Magnus Freight Board. It came from the executive assistant of Eleanor Riggs, one of the most powerful board members at Magnus. She'd always struck me as sharp, the type who never missed anything and never repeated herself. The message was brief. Ms. Carter, Ms. Riggs has requested a private video call to discuss a sensitive matter regarding the predictive pricing system. Please confirm your availability at your earliest convenience. This conversation will be considered off the record unless otherwise noted. I stared at the screen for a full minute. So now the board wanted to talk. Not HR, not Dean, not even his over-promoted intern girlfriend. The board. I texted my lawyer. Just got a call request from Magnus Freight Board. Should I accept? He replied immediately, yes, but record it and don't agree to anything yet. By noon, I was on the video call, dressed in a crisp blouse with soft makeup and a composed smile. Eleanor Riggs appeared on the screen, her gray hair pulled into a sleek bun, the background behind her clean and cold, just a plain black wall with the company's crest subtly visible in the corner. Ms. Carter, she began, her voice calm and precise. Thank you for making the time. Of course, I said. I was curious to hear from you. She didn't bother with small talk. We've been informed that the predictive pricing tool your team developed is non-functional. It appears the core module is missing or inaccessible. I nodded. That's unfortunate to hear. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Your former manager, Dean West, indicated that the system was complete before your departure. I let that sit in the silence for a moment. I delivered everything that was agreed upon at the time of my dismissal, I said. But if something's not working, I wouldn't know. I haven't worked there since he terminated my contract. Terminated your contract, she repeated, then paused. Despite your central role in developing a tool critical to our next investor phase? I could tell she was already piecing things together. I was told the company was restructuring, I said. It was explained to me that my role no longer fit the direction Magnus was heading. Eleanor let out the smallest breath of frustration. Then she asked the question I knew was coming. Do you still have access to the core module? I didn't smile, but I didn't flinch either. I created the module on my own time, using my own equipment, I said carefully. I documented everything. All the logs, timestamps, and version history reflect that. And would you be open to assisting Magnus in recovering the file? That was the dance. They needed me, but they still didn't want to admit it. Not yet. I'm open to conversations, I said, provided they're approached professionally and fairly. I see, she said. We'll be in touch. The call ended without ceremony, but I could feel the shift in the air. The next day, my phone rang again. This time from Jeremy Quinn, Magnus's acting CFO. A numbers man. Less ego, more desperation. Sarah, he said, skipping introductions. Listen, I won't waste your time. We're bleeding money. The East Coast contract we pitched last quarter? It's on the edge. They were expecting results. Deliverables. Instead, they got a half-broken interface that can't even pull cost forecasts. I stayed quiet. He continued. We're looking at potential breach of contract fines if this doesn't get resolved. Legal is already involved. And Dean, he sighed. Dean's not handling it well. I almost said good, but I bit my tongue. I heard you might still have access to the missing components, he said carefully. If you're willing to come in, even briefly, there's compensation on the table. I glanced at the glass of wine I hadn't touched the night before. I thought of the nights I stayed up until 2 a.m. building that module, of the silent humiliation of being fired for the benefit of someone's girlfriend. I looked back at the screen and said, I'd consider a licensing agreement, but it would need to go through my legal counsel. I don't freelance for free anymore. A pause. Then, understood. Please send us your terms. I did. With my lawyer's help, we drafted a licensing proposal. Market rate, plus back pay for work already completed. But I also added something bold, an attribution clause. Any future use of the module would have to list Carter Technologies as the original developer. My name would not be erased. That afternoon, the board held a meeting behind closed doors. Dean was not invited. Word trickled out that Eleanor Riggs had requested an audit of recent executive decisions related to personnel and project management. And later that evening, I received one final text. "Sarah, I messed up, please. Let's talk." Dean. I stared at it for a moment, then deleted it. He had his chance. By the end of the week, things at Magnus Freight had gone from quietly chaotic to publicly explosive. The East Coast client, Langford Logistics, one of their biggest accounts, demanded an emergency review call. They weren't interested in excuses, apologies, or vague promises. They wanted a demonstration. And they wanted to speak to the original architect of the pricing model. When that email reached Magnus's boardroom, it landed like a thunderclap. According to someone still inside the company, an old coworker of mine who'd slipped me updates through encrypted messages, the scene was pure chaos. Dean tried to bluff his way through, claiming the tech was fully operational, that a new version was being optimized. But Langford wasn't buying it. They'd already seen the gaps. They'd already run the model, or what was left of it, and the results were laughable. Zeroed-out data points, broken logic loops, entire freight categories missing from analysis. Magnus had promised efficiency gains. Instead, they were delivering delays, misquotes, and a looming lawsuit. That same afternoon, I received a formal request from Langford's Chief Technology Officer, Monica Greer. "We've been informed you were the original creator of the core algorithm. Would you be open to a private consultation? We want to understand what went wrong and how it can be fixed." This was no longer just about revenge. This was about reputation. I accepted. We met virtually the next morning. Monica was sharp, no nonsense, and refreshingly direct. "Tell me honestly," she said within minutes, "is the system fixable without your involvement?" I didn't even have to think. Not without rebuilding major components from scratch. And the ones they still have are fragile at best. She leaned back in her chair and nodded slowly. "That's what I suspected. And what about ownership?" "I hold the original source code," I said clearly. "All developed on my personal equipment, off hours. My lawyer has all the documentation. I'm happy to license the tool, but I won't give it away." She smiled faintly. "Good, because we're not looking for free. We're looking for functional." Later that day, Langford sent Magnus an ultimatum. They'd agree to a 2-week grace period only if the original architect, me, was brought in to oversee the model's completion and deployment. If not, they'd terminate the entire contract and go public with the breach. That same evening, I got a call from Eleanor Riggs again. No assistant this time. "Ms. Carter," she said, her tone unusually cool. "I'd like to formally apologize on behalf of the board." I said nothing, waiting. "You were let go under circumstances that appear to have been politically motivated and strategically reckless." I allowed myself a breath of relief. "We're reviewing personnel decisions made by Mr. West and others," she continued. "But in the meantime, the board is prepared to accept your licensing terms. Additionally, we would like to discuss a transitional leadership role." I raised an eyebrow. "Leadership?" "Yes," she said. "Langford specifically requested your oversight. The board agrees. We'd like to bring you back as Director of Predictive Systems, reporting directly to the Executive Committee. No involvement from Dean West." The offer was tempting. Not because I needed a title, but because it meant they were finally seeing me. But I wasn't about to return blindly. "I'll need full creative control," I said. "My own team, my own project calendar. No interference. And I want the attribution clause to remain." "Agreed," she said without hesitation. "And Dean?" "Gone," I said. "Or I walk." There was a pause. Then she said, "Understood." 2 days later, it was official. Magnus released a formal statement welcoming me back to oversee Phase 2 of the predictive pricing model. But behind closed doors, it was clear that something bigger was brewing. The board launched an internal investigation into project mismanagement. Audit trails uncovered a mess: overextended budgets, misused discretionary funds, and emails showing Dean had promised my role to his girlfriend months before I was let go. One message in particular leaked to the board. "Just let her finish the algorithm. We'll flip her out afterward. Lila can shadow for a week. She'll pick it up." The arrogance of it was staggering. And now, the arrogance was unraveling. HR began interviewing employees. Dean stopped showing up to the office. And I walked back into that building with my head high, my laptop in my bag, and my name on the new office door. No one said anything at first, just quiet nods, averted eyes. A few whispered good lucks from people who had watched me leave and now watched me return. But it was more than luck now. It was justice. By the end of my first week back at Magnus, it was clear the damage ran deeper than anyone had admitted. I wasn't just fixing code. I was excavating it, peeling back rushed patches, overwritten functions, and confused variable names like a forensic analyst at a digital crime scene. And with every new discovery, one thing became painfully obvious. Dean hadn't just fired me. He had tried to erase me. He and Lila had gutted the architecture I built, replacing key modules with shortcut scripts downloaded from third-party libraries. There were no redundancies, no safeguards, no documentation. Worse, someone had tampered with the project logs, trying to make it look like Lila had contributed to the algorithm. But code doesn't lie. It has fingerprints, structure, rhythm, naming conventions. And mine were everywhere. Engineers began stopping by my office. Some curious, others quiet. One afternoon, Miguel, a senior developer from another division, stepped in, closed the door, and sat down without speaking. He looked shaken. "You need to know something," he said finally. "Dean told us not to talk to you. Said you were toxic. Said you'd stolen proprietary work." My stomach tightened, but I didn't speak. Miguel continued. "I didn't believe it, but I was scared. I've got a kid, a mortgage, and Dean, he made people disappear." I nodded slowly. Then he said, "But I kept backups. From the original branch you led, the one before they touched it. I have everything. The real file history, with your name in every commit." He pulled out a USB and slid it across the desk. I stared at it like it was a loaded weapon. Because in a way, it was. That same day, Eleanor Riggs called another emergency board meeting. The internal audit had uncovered a damning trail of communications. Not just about my firing, but about Dean's entire conduct. He had approved expense reports for Lila's training trips, which were actually weekends in Napa. He authorized hiring bonuses for interns who never appeared. And worst of all, he'd lied to the board about the model's readiness, knowing full well it wasn't functional. At 5:14 p.m., an all-staff email was sent. Subject: Leadership Transition Update. "Dear team, effective immediately, Dean West is no longer with the company. We thank him for his service and wish him the best in future endeavors." Classic corporate speak. But inside the boardroom, I was told the words were harsher. Gross negligence. Abuse of power. Breach of fiduciary trust. His father, the CEO, had tried to shield him for weeks, but the evidence was too overwhelming. By the time Dean was escorted out of the building, he looked nothing like the smug, invincible heir I remembered. And Lila? She quietly disappeared from the employee portal the same evening. No email, no farewell. Just gone. I should have felt victorious. In some ways, I did. But the moment that truly hit me wasn't dramatic at all. It came late one night when I was alone in my office reviewing the newly refactored model. I hit run, and for the first time in months, the dashboard returned clean projections. No errors, no crashes, just clean, beautiful logic. My logic. I leaned back in my chair and felt something shift in my chest. Peace. Not just because I'd proven them wrong, but because I'd proven myself right. All those nights I thought I was overreacting, paranoid, unworthy. Number I'd seen the truth. I just hadn't been ready to act on it. Until they forced my hand. The next morning, I met with Eleanor to deliver the final working version of the model. "This is brilliant," she said, scanning the metrics. "Langford's going to double their order." "I'm glad," I replied. "But after this quarter, I'm stepping down." She looked up sharply. "May I ask why?" I smiled. "Because I've done what I came to do. I fixed what was broken, and now it's time to build something new, from the ground up on my terms." She nodded slowly. "And what will that be?" "I'm launching my own firm," I said. "Consulting, systems design, mentorship. There are a lot of people out there like me. Underestimated, overlooked, undervalued. I want to help them rise." 2 weeks later, I walked out of Magnus for the last time. This time, no cardboard box, no HR escort. Just the sound of my heels against the tile and the weight of closure in my shoulders. Outside, the sun was warm on my face. I turned my phone over in my hand. A dozen new notifications. Congratulations, press requests, client inquiries. I'd announced the launch of Carter Systems, and the response was already overwhelming. At the top of the list, a message from Monica Greer. "Langford wants you as our lead systems advisor. Let's build the future." I smiled. They thought they'd deleted me. But I wasn't just a line of code in their system. I was the architect of my own. And I had just gone live.